Di-da-da-da, yo, 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 yo. Good evening, my holy sisters and brothers. That was Rabbi Shlomo Katz singing his song Nigun Mitzpeh. Forgive me for taking a little extra time. Nina is out running errands with the kids, so I just needed to share the show into the groups that we share it. Who is with us today? We have some spectacular learning to do on a Tuesday evening. Paula in Chicago, Stephen in New Hampshire, Renee in Indiana. Just getting an odd sound in the room. Sorry. Renee in Indiana, Ann in Merced, James in Indianapolis, Nancy in North Carolina, Tom in PA, Sharon in Lebanon, New Jersey, Patrice in Utah, Andy in Virginia, Paul in the Great Northeast. Bill in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. Bill, you get around. Dale in North Adams, Massachusetts. Belle in Shelbyville. Michael in Scranton. Randy in Florida. Misha Beirach, please, for Yocheved Basmalka. May she have a complete healing, and it should be speedy, and we say amen. Rose in New Mexico, Cynthia in Brooklyn, I guess that's Brooklyn. David in Notre Dame, John in Lewiston, Maine. Lots of people today. This is great. Gwen is happy for the class in Michigan. PK in Colorado. It keeps jumping on me as I scroll. Catherine in Oregon. Julie in Texas. And I think I got everybody on the Facebook side. And then, let me see if I can click on the YouTube. Yes, Seraphim in Sacramento, Marjorie in Georgia, Gigi in British Columbia, Lucy in Minnesota, and Lynn in North Texas. Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be learning a little bit about why the high priest wore what the high priest wore, the priests of the vestments of the high priest, and I'm not talking about the fine linen garments with which he entered the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, but the sort of day-to-day garments of the high priest, and as we see, he wears them on Yom Kippur as well, and he has to change back and forth between the linen vestments of the high priest only worn on Yom Kippur and the everyday garments, which are still extremely elevated and special and only worn by the high priest, but he wears them as well on other days. So we're going to learn what he wears and what is the meaning of the articles that he wears, and the interesting connection between what the high priest wears and the Ark of the Covenant itself, in which the tablets of the Ten Commandments were stored, as well as the Torah written by Moses. So we'll get to that in 1 second on today's daf, our page 72 here in Tractate Yoma. I'll just mention that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, whose image is right back there, had a beautiful teaching about the garments of the high priest. So as we'll see, the garments of the high priest include the ephod and the breastplate. So the ephod is sort of like an apron, kind of like a long apron that goes down the front and the back. And that's the ephod, and on it is the breastplate. And the breastplate has on it 12 stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel. It's interesting how there were 12 tribes arrayed around the tabernacle in the desert, in the encampment in the desert, even though the Levites, who are one of the tribes, were not in one of the 12 points of the array. They were immediately surrounding the tabernacle. So how could there be 12 around them? Because Joseph was split into two tribes for that purpose, Ephraim and Manasseh, his sons. At any rate, the 12 stones, I think there Joseph is represented, right? That's not going to be Ephraim and Manasseh on the breastplate, although I need to check that. I'm not sure. At any rate, there's the 12 stones representing the 12 tribes, and there's also special stones on the shoulders, and there also the tribes are written on those stones on the shoulder. Then under the ephod, under this apron, he has the robe, the blue robe of the high priest. and he's also going to have that front plate, the golden front plate. Now, so the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, comments that the breastplate with the stones are the 12 tribes, and the shoulder stones on which the tribes are actually written, they represent one kind of Jew. The robe represents a second kind of Jew, and the pomegranates that are on the bottom of the robe, the fringe along the bottom of the robe, has these bells, pomegranates and bells, or pomegranates that are bells. I think it's pomegranates and bells, made of gold. And so whenever the high priest would walk anywhere around the temple, you would hear him, right? If you've ever been to like a Grateful Dead show, and very often they're like the hippie type people at the Grateful Dead shows will wear these anklets with bells. And so whenever they're walking, you can hear them walking. Well, the high priest had bells on the bottom of his robe, right? And they were in the shape of these pomegranates or interspersed with pomegranates. And the idea here, and that represents a third kind of Jew. So according to the Rebbe, what did he mean by this? That the stones and the shoulder stones, where the tribes are actually written, so these are the Jews who are kind of at this lofty level where they're very connected to Torah, right? They're kind of outwardly connected to the Torah, to mitzvahs, to observance. People, you look at them and like, that's a religious Jew, right? So they're represented by the stones and the written, revealed nature of their Judaism. Then underneath the ephod and the breastplate is the blue robe, right? And this represents sort of like many of the Jews, right? Some might say the majority, but these are the Jews who are connected to Judaism, but it's not so revealed, it's not so open, it's not so obvious that they're connected to Judaism. And then the pomegranates on the fringe of the robe near the bottom, you might say, okay, these are the Jews that are totally disconnected, not just from Torah, but from Judaism, from tradition, from holidays. They're just totally disconnected. They might not even know they're Jewish. And so they're kind of like, they're arrayed along the bottom of the robe, but they're represented by pomegranates. And there's a teaching, very traditional old teaching that the Rebbe really loved to share, which is that any Jew, no matter how disconnected he may be from Torah and from Judaism, is still as filled with mitzvahs as a pomegranate is filled with seeds. And so that's this idea that, there's the Pintel Yid, it's also called, or the Jewish spark in every Jew, that no matter how far away the Jews get from Judaism and from Torah, they're born in this tribe. They have this heritage that goes all the way back to Abraham and Sarah. And so there's a longing in every Jew. And there's going to be some kind of inherent righteousness. And it's not to say that everybody's all good. That's for sure. At all three levels, we all make mistakes and transgressions. But even the one who's totally disconnected, the other Jews who are a little bit connected or very connected, must not look down on the Jew that's totally disconnected. In fact, you should be impressed with him. He's got all kinds of righteousness that you don't even know about. And if he is really disconnected like that, so your job is just to help him connect back to the tradition, to the Masorah, to the heritage, to Torah, to mitzvahs. So all those kind of like hidden mitzvahs have a chance to blossom and be revealed. So we can remember that teaching as we go through today's page. It will be very relevant. Okay. We are holding. So this is page 72. We are on chapter 7 of Tractate Yoma. We're in chapter 7. We're discussing the first Mishna of this chapter, and the first Mishna of chapter. Wait a minute. What am I saying? I'm quite mistaken. We already went yesterday. We had 3 Mishnas. We're discussing the third Mishnah of chapter 7, which describes the garments of the priest, of the high priest, and how they differ from the garments of the ordinary priest. And we've already been talking about that. Ordinary priest has 4 basically linen garments, some wool mixed in. the high priest has this additional, the robe, the ephod, the breastplate, and the golden front plate that sits in front of his forehead. So the Mishnah makes those distinctions, and now the Gemara is elaborating on those distinctions. So we pick it up in the middle of the A side of page 72 here in chapter 7. I'll mention we're on page 72. This tractate has 88 pages. So we're just 16 days away from the completion of Tractate Yoma. And then with God's help, we'll begin Tractate Sukkah, which is the laws of Sukkot. The Siyum is scheduled for Thursday, July 8th. That last week of the tractate, Nina and I and the kids are going on a family vacation. So we're going to do another one of these. We're away on vacation. You move forward on your own. I'll keep reading on my own. When we get back together, I'll cover highlights from the week that we did on our own. You on your own, me on my own. But the thing is, like we get back Thursday night, so I'm not going to be able to do a class that day. And then the next day, Friday at noon, that's technically the first day of Tractate Sukkah. I think I'll probably be making the Siyum on that day. So, unless somebody tells me there's a reason not to do that, we'll probably be making that Siyum on Friday, July 9th. It's not ideal since, I'll be away that previous week. But at any rate, we'll handle it. We'll be flexible. This is just part of doing a 7.5-year daily class. But I'm just giving you advance warning that last week of the tractate, the last 8 or 9 pages, you'll do on your own, I'll do on my own, and then we'll do a makeup class for that whole week when I get back, and it will also be the Siyum of Tractate Yoma. Okay, let's get back to it. Where am I? Okay, yes, middle of page 72 on the A side. So the Gemara discusses various halachas, various laws concerning the priestly vestments and other sacred vessels. Rahava said that Rav Yehuda said, one who intentionally tears any of the priestly vestments transgresses a prohibition and is flogged. As it is stated concerning the robe, it shall have a hem of woven work around the opening of it, like the opening of a coat of mail. It shall not be torn. It shall not be torn, it says in Exodus 28:32. And let me just mention that the top of the page that we're skipping is a continuation of a portion that started yesterday, the Gemara on this third Mishna in chapter 7, which is about the priestly vestments. And the first, page or so of that discussion is all about the actual weaving of the priestly garments and the curtain in the tabernacle and later in the sanctuary, and how many strands every thread had to contain. And there's a lot of discussion. Is it 6 strands? Is it 12 strands? Is it 20 strands? Is it 24 strands? So it's a very interesting discussion, especially if you're a weaver. But suffice it to say that when we're talking about the materials that were used in the priestly vestments and in the curtain, it was the finest quality and woven to the highest standards of beauty, refinement, durability, etc. Okay, so if you tear one of these priestly garments, that you would have violated a prohibition in the Torah, an explicit prohibition that it shall not be torn. Just as it is prohibited to tear the opening of the robe, so too it is prohibited to tear any of the priestly vestments. Now, Rav Acha Bar Yaakov strongly objects to this. But perhaps, he says, this is what the Merciful One is saying in the Torah. An opening should be made in order that it not tear. In other words, an opening should be made in the robe in such a way that it would not tear. An opening should be made in the robe that is reinforced, that you can get in and out of it, every day the priest puts it on, but it won't tear. Maybe that's what it means when the Torah says it shall not be torn. In other words, the Torah was giving an explanation, not a prohibition. The Gemara rejects this. Is it written in order that it not be torn? No, it is written, it shall not be torn. Clearly, the intention of the verse is to state a prohibition. Rabbi Elazar said, one who detaches the breastplate from upon the ephod, or one who removes the staves, those long poles of the Ark of the Covenant from their rings, also transgresses a Torah prohibition. Excuse me. And is flogged, as it is stated in Exodus 28:28, and the breastplate shall not be detached from the ephod. And it is also stated, the staves shall be in the rings of the ark, they shall not be removed from it. Exodus 25:15. Rav Acha bar Yaakov strongly objects to this. But perhaps when the merciful one said this in the Torah, his intention was to strengthen them and to make them fast so that the breastplate not become detached from the ephod and that the staves not be removed from the rings of the ark. And it means they should be, attached firmly so that they don't get torn off, firmly so that the staves don't get removed. But it's not an actual prohibition. The Gemara rejects this. Is it written in order that it not become detached and in order that they not be removed? No, it is written, they shall not be detached and they shall not be removed. Clearly, the intention of the verse is to state a prohibition. So we skip down a little further, and the Gemara cites other statements concerning the ark. Now that we've introduced the ark, first we said the robe shall not be torn and the breastplate shall not be removed from the ephod, from that apron, the priestly apron. And likewise, the staves of the ark shall not be removed. So now that we've brought in the ark, the Gemara will take a little bit of a digression about the ark. Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Hanina, said, what is the meaning of that which is written? And you shall make the boards of the tabernacle of acacia wood standing. Right? It's not of standing acacia wood. You shall make the boards of the tabernacle of acacia wood. Now, the tabernacle in the desert, right? This was the original structure in which the priests serve every day and the high priest serves, and in which the ceremonies of Yom Kippur were done, etc. This is where the ark was, and the incense the altar and the incense altar were also inside the tabernacle. But the tabernacle was surrounded by a courtyard defined by this wall of boards, right? So there were these standing boards, and it was the Levites' job in the encampment in the desert, and then eventually in Israel when the people settled down, and this stood at Shiloh for many years, right, to construct, to put, take it down and put it up in the new place that God indicated, all during those 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. And then in Israel, it occupied a few different locations in those 400 years before the first temple was built. So that wall around the courtyard of the tabernacle was made of boards. They were like boards with sockets, and they went together. It was a very nifty construction project, almost like a wooden erector set that God instructed Moses to instruct Betzalel, the craftsman who supervised the building of the tabernacle in the desert. Okay, so what about these boards? They were made of acacia wood, and at Exodus 26:15, it says, you shall make the boards for the tabernacle of acacia wood, and then it adds omdim, standing. What does that mean, standing? This verse teaches that the boards of wood used for the tabernacle should stand in the same direction in which they grew from the ground, as a tree. That's one interpretation. Alternatively, standing, omdim, means that they supported their gold plating and prevented it from falling. Okay, they were plated with gold and they supported the gold. Okay, interesting. Alternatively, omdim, standing, is written to hint at the following spectacularly beautiful spiritual teaching. Perhaps you will say that now that the tabernacle is no longer in use, their hope is lost and their chance is abandoned. Right? So it's saying, now they're speaking like this, well, the tabernacle's no longer in use. Eventually was replaced by Solomon's temple. And later Solomon's temple was destroyed, and then it was rebuilt as the second temple. But as soon as the temple came into use, no more tabernacle. So according to this idea, perhaps you will say that now that the tabernacle is no longer in use, their hope, the boards of the tabernacle, the wooden boards, their hope is lost and their chance is abandoned, right? This was once a tree, and it became a board, and it became part of the holiest structure on earth, the tabernacle, right? Where the people connected with God. And then the tabernacle at a certain point was no longer required. And so, now it's like the wood, like the original tree is so sad. And after being stored away, the boards will no longer return to use. Therefore, the verse states omdim, standing in the present tense, to indicate that they stand forever and ever. They're no longer standing in the physical world. They might have been consigned to some storage area somewhere. They might have rotted away. But the fact that they stood once for this beautiful, beautiful service of worship that the people did when they connected with God in the desert, and everybody was experiencing a level of prophecy that no one experienced since then, right? Since they had the constant presence of the Lord, cloud of fire by day, by night, pillar of cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night, right? It's like, so because they stood then, there's a sense that they stand forever. What was the tabernacle all about? It was about the mitzvahs done on behalf of the people so that they would be in a constant relationship with God. We don't have the tabernacle anymore. We don't have the temple anymore. But we do have the Torah and we do have mitzvahs. So there's a hint here that every time you do a mitzvah, every time you do God's will, every time you do what God commanded you to do, and you don't have to be a Jew. Jews have 613 mitzvahs. We can't do them all. Many of them don't apply to us. Many of them are only for priests. If you're not a priest, you can't do those. Some apply only to women. If you're a man, you can't do those. So it's not that every mitzvah is for everybody. If you're not a Jew, there's 7 Noahide laws that do apply to you. Every time you fulfill your obligation as defined in the Torah, that deed stands forever. The Gemara returns to its discussion of the priestly vestments. Rabbi Chama Bar Chanina said, what is the meaning of that which is written, the plated, Hebrew serad, Sarad. What is the meaning of that which is written? The plated garments for serving in the sanctuary. Right, so the plated garments, plated, Plaited. I think that normally means braided, right? Plaited, like the plaits of hair. So it would seem to be kind of woven, intermeshed, braided. It would seem that word is just talking about, they're all weaver's work, right? The garments of the high priest are woven together, not just sewed, but woven. So you might think that it means woven, but now the Gemara is going to explore this word, sarad. Why does the verse refer to the priestly vestments as sarad garments? And Rabbi Chama Bar Chanina offers a spiritual, a homiletic interpretation. Were it not for the priestly vestments, which provide atonement for the Jewish people, there would not remain a remnant, sarid, there would not remain a remnant, sarid, or survivor from the haters of the Jewish people. This is a euphemism used to refer to the Jewish people themselves. Haters of the Jewish people is when, the idea is when you're pointing out that Jews are misbehaving, the Gemara will talk about the haters of the Jews are misbehaving so that it doesn't say in writing that Jews are misbehaving. But they're calling them the haters of the Jewish people because they really are self-hating Jews. These are the Jews who remove themselves from the Jewish community. Right? And so were it not for the priestly vestments, right, that the garments themselves are an integral part of the atonement that Aaron makes, or the high priest makes, for the Jewish people. And because the Jewish people often stray so far away from the law, from our obligations, from what God's will for us, we would be destroyed. Like God would just get angry with us. Like there were so many Jews who misbehaved in the desert, right? Who went after the golden calf, or who went to fight a war when it was not authorized to do so, or when they were complaining and whining and God became angry at them and unleashed plagues against them, right? If there wasn't this path of atonement, God would be so frustrated with us. He said, look, I chose you for special service. I chose you for distinction. I chose you for a big responsibility in this world, and you keep letting me down. Enough of you. I'll pick some other people. I'll start over. I'll start over with Moses' family. He made that offer to Moses. But God also provided a path of atonement. In the times of the Tabernacle and the Temple, that atonement was achieved through the worship, through the service of the high priest. He needs these garments, and if he didn't have them, if he wasn't making an atonement for us, none of us would be left. And that word sarad, plated, similar to sarid, remnant. Another interpretation, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani said that the school of Rabbi Shimon taught the priestly vestments are referred to as sarad garments because they are garments that are woven in their completed form upon the loom, as opposed to weaving the material and then cutting and sewing pieces of the material together to create the required form. And then just a small part of them remains, masridin, same root, which is not completed upon the loom. And what is the remnant, the part that was not woven? Resh Lakish said this is just the needlework required to complete the garment. So it gives you a little bit of an insight into how special these garments of the high priest were. They didn't, like most garments are made, you just weave, like, make yards of material, and then you cut the material to the pieces and size that you need, and then you sew that together. No, the priest's garment were woven to his exact size, right? They didn't make more or less. They actually wove it on the loom to be the size needed for him. Very, very special and difficult craftsmanship in order to achieve those garments. Skip a little. The Gemara cites statements concerning other temple vessels. Now, we've been talking about how special the priestly garments are. We've already talked a little bit about the Ark of the Covenant and how it was made. We're going back to the Ark of the Covenant. So Rechava said that Rav Yehuda said, the Torah states that the ark should be made of wood with gold plating inside and out. We learned that at Exodus 25, 10, and 11. In order to achieve this, Betzalel, so he was the craftsman appointed by God to be the one in charge of the construction of the tabernacle and the ark and the menorah and all the implements, all the service vessels. Betzalel made 3 arks, a middle one made of wood, whose height was 9 handbreadths, an inner one made of gold, whose height was 8 handbreadths, and an outer one of gold, whose height was 10 handbreadths and a bit. And these arks were nested. So there's only one Ark of the Covenant, but it had an inner gold layer, a middle wooden layer, and an outer gold layer. Why was it made of solid gold? Because they had to carry it from one place to another in the desert. So this made it lighter. It was really made out of wood, but plated with gold inside and out. Then there's some debate about the exact dimensions of the ark. And then Rabbi Yochanan said, there were 3 crowns on the sacred vessels in the temple. The crown of the altar and of the ark and of the table. Now, it actually says crown in the Bible. Let me read that. Right, so Exodus 25:10. They shall make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits its length, 1.5 cubits its width, and 1.5 cubits its height. And you shall, now 25:11, and you shall overlay it with pure gold from inside and from outside. You shall overlay it, and you shall make upon it a golden crown all around. Now, the actual top of the ark is the 2 angels, the cherubim, right? In English, cherubim, but the form of 2 angels that sat on top of the ark cover. So what is this crown? It's not like the image of a crown on top, like a king's crown on top of the ark. But usually the way this is thought to have been done is it was like the way there's the little spikes of a crown were all around the edge of the ark cover. So maybe that's what it meant physically. But now we're going to get into a more homiletic spiritual teaching of what does it mean that it was commanded to put a crown on the ark. So Rabbi Yochanan says there were 3 crowns on the sacred vessels in the temple. The crown of the altar, the crown of the ark, and the crown of the table. Now, was there a crown on the table? The table is where the showbreads were kept on, from week to week inside the tabernacle and later in the temple. Was there an actual figure of a crown on it? No. So he's talking about sort of metaphorically using the word crown, the idea of a crown on these 3 vessels, the altar, the ark, and the table. The regal appearance that they provided symbolized power and authority. The crown of the altar symbolized the crown of priesthood. Aaron was deserving and took it, right? So the distinction of the priesthood went to Aaron, and so he wore the crown of the high priest, and then that was passed down to his descendants. And then the crown of the table, of the showbreads, symbolized the abundance and blessing that were associated with the crown of kingship. There was no king for a long time. Eventually, there was the first king, Saul, he was appointed by the prophet Samuel in the book of Samuel, but he was not deserving, and he lost the crown of kingship. David was deserving and took it for himself and his descendants after him, right? So the crown of kingship, so the crown of the priesthood was taken by Aaron and his descendants. The crown of kingship was taken by David and his descendants. The crown of the ark symbolized the crown of Torah, right? Because the ark contained the tablets of the commandments and the actual Torah written by Moses. The crown of the ark symbolized the crown of Torah. It is still sitting and waiting to be acquired, and anyone who wishes to take it may come and take it and be crowned with the crown of Torah. It's sort of like the legend of the sword and the stone. Anyone can come. Anyone who is deserving can come and take that crown and be crowned with the crown of Torah. Now, perhaps you will say that it is inferior to the other 2 crowns, and that is why nobody has taken it. Therefore, the verse states about the wisdom of Torah, Proverbs 8:15, through me, meaning the Torah, kings will reign, indicating that the strength of the other crowns is derived from the crown of Torah, which is the greatest of them all. So the greatest crown in our tradition, in our teaching, in the Torah, in the Bible, in the whole Jewish story, the greatest crown of all is available to one and all, right? There's no hierarchy here. Anybody can take the crown of Torah if they're willing to dedicate themselves to Torah study. The Gemara presents a number of statements based on the idea that the ark symbolizes the Torah. Rabbi Yochanan raised a contradiction. According to the way the word crown is written in the Torah at Exodus 25:11, without vowels, it could be pronounced one way, it could be pronounced different ways, right? The Torah was written without vowels. And so the same letter combination could be pronounced 2 different ways and therefore be 2 different words. Since it's written without vowels, according to Rabbi Yochanan, it should be pronounced zar, meaning strange. But according to the traditional vocalization, we read it as zer, or zeir, meaning crown. So these 2 ways of understanding the word Zayin Resh, 2 letters, it could be pronounced zar, but we pronounce it zer, so that it means crown. Otherwise, it would mean right? You shall overlay it with pure gold, and from inside and from outside you shall overlay it, and you shall make upon it a golden crown all around. That makes sense. It should be crown, but you could have said it shall be golden and strange all around. What would it mean? Strange, zar, strange. What would that mean? So these 2 ways of understanding the word appear to contradict each other, and Rabbi Yochanan explains. The 2 understandings apply to 2 different situations. If one is deserving by performing mitzvahs, by fulfilling his obligations as defined by the Torah, then Torah becomes a crown for him, zer. But if one is not deserving, the Torah will be a stranger, zara, to him, and he will forget his studies. So now what they're talking about is a Torah scholar, right? So these are Torah scholars, the sages of the Talmud. They are Torah scholars discussing the proper way to be a Torah scholar. And the point they're going to make over and over again is that if you learn and learn and learn and learn, and you know the Torah by heart, and you know the whole Talmud by heart, and there are people who do that, but it doesn't change you inside, and it doesn't inspire you to aspire to do God's will and to have a fear of heaven, then you're not a Torah scholar, right? Then you're like a phony, then it hasn't touched you, and the Torah will not remain with you, and it will be a stranger to you. So just the fact that you have intellectual mastery of the Torah will not connect you to the Torah and to God. It has to touch your soul. It has to touch your heart. And it has to inspire you to love and fear God. Now, these days, love, very popular emotion in modern culture. Fear, people don't like fear. I don't want to be afraid. I don't want to think that God is a God who wants me to be afraid. Bible thumping, that's bad. That's bad. That's bad. That is false. That is false. One should have fear of heaven, as we're going to be reading here. Now, a better translation might be awe of heaven, right? You should absolutely love God, and you need it in equal measure, and maybe even your love can outstrip your fear a little bit. But you want to have basically as much fear of heaven as love of heaven, and both of them, like, as much as possible. Right? Why is fear of heaven so important? Because it's going to remain with you at all times that that God is a watchful God, is a fair God, is a just God, and you're going to be called to account. You're going to be rewarded for all your good deeds, but you're also going to be held accountable for all your bad deeds, all your misdeeds. And understanding that is awe of heaven. Awe of heaven, that heaven sees everything, God sees everything, and he'll be called to account for everything. That's a proper, rational fear of heaven. Rabbi Yochanan raised a contradiction. It is written, and you shall make for yourself a wooden ark, Deuteronomy 10:1, implying that Moses alone was commanded to construct the ark. And it is written, and they shall make an ark of acacia wood, Exodus 25:10, implying that the Jewish people were all commanded to be involved in its construction. And the apparent resolution to this contradiction is that although Moses actually constructed the ark, everyone was required to support the endeavor. And so too, from here it is derived with regard to a Torah scholar that the members of his town, the members of his community, should perform his work for him to support him and allow him to focus on his studies, since it is also the town's responsibility to enable him to study, right? Not everybody can go to the moon. Only a few astronauts can go, but they go on behalf of all of us. And so we support NASA and that moonshot endeavor. Only one person could be the high priest, but he serves on behalf of all of us, and so we support him in that endeavor. And likewise, not everybody can be a Torah scholar, but there's these great rabbis in the world who are learning 24 hours a day, and they're doing that on behalf of all of us, and it's good to support people like that. The verse states concerning the ark, from within and from without you shall cover it. Rava said this alludes to the idea that any Torah scholar whose inside is not like his outside, in other words, that whose outward expression of righteousness is insincere, he is not a Torah scholar. Right? So somebody who knows a lot and can teach a lot and say a lot, but if his deeds don't reflect his learning, if he is inside not composed like a Torah scholar, then he's not really a Torah scholar. And Abaye said, and some say it was Rabba Bar Ula who said, not only is such a person not to be considered a Torah scholar, but he is called loathsome, right? A hypocrite in Torah, somebody who holds himself out as a Torah scholar, but is actually a hypocrite, is not a righteous person. That is a loathsome person, according to Abaye in the name of, and some say Rabba Bar Ula. As it is stated, Job 15:16, What then of one loathsome and foul, a man who drinks iniquity like water? Although he drinks the Torah like water, since he sins, his Torah is considered iniquitous, and that makes him loathsome and foul. Now, that's not to say that a Torah scholar can't make mistakes. Obviously, people make mistakes. But if you perceive that he's holding himself out as a righteous Torah scholar, but he's like ongoing pattern of sin, that would be a loathsome person. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani said that Rabbi Yonason said, what is the meaning of that which is written? Proverbs 17:16. Why is there a price in the hand of a fool to buy wisdom if he has no heart? And this expresses the following sentiment. Woe to them, haters of Torah scholars, which is a euphemism for Torah scholars themselves, who immerse themselves in Torah and have no fear of heaven. They are fools. They try to acquire the wisdom of Torah, but since they have no fear of heaven in their hearts, they lack the ability to do so. Right? One who studies Torah but doesn't feel a strong connection to God, both love and fear, what's he doing? Right? What's he doing? That's what we keep learning over and over. Rabbi Yanai declared that the situation may be expressed by the following sentiment. Pity him who has no courtyard, but senselessly makes a gate for his courtyard. What does he mean? Fear of heaven is like the courtyard. The study of Torah is the gate that provides entrance to the courtyard. The study of Torah is purposeful only if it leads to fear of heaven, according to Rabbi Yanai. Rava said to the sages in the study hall, and now I'm almost done, so if you've got questions, I hope you've got them in. I'll need to scan the comments myself since Nina is out. Rava said to the sages in the study hall, I beg of you, do not inherit Gehenna twice. By studying Torah without the accompanying fear of heaven, not only are you undeserving of a place in the world to come, but even in this world, you experience Gehenna. Right? So Gehenna is like a purgatory. It's like a place you go to after you die to be refined so that you can move on to your place in the world to come. But according to Rava, saying to the sages in the study hall, if you study Torah without an accompanying fear of heaven, you won't get that place later. And even here on earth, you're making it like a hell on earth for yourself. You're depriving yourself of the pleasures, the paradise-like pleasures of proper Torah study accompanied with proper fear of heaven, meaning a person who conducts himself with righteousness, right? A person who has fear of heaven not only doesn't sin or cheat when people are looking, he also doesn't do it in private because he knows that God is always watching. Okay, that's what I have for us today. Let me see if I can scan the comments. Not always easy to do. Okay. Very good. Bill says, one of the most crucial teachings I was ever given about God's mercy and God's glory is this, that there is no time with God, meaning the boards that stood before him in worship once, to him still do, and so too our deeds, right? Makes sense because God is not limited like we are. For us, there's linear time. You know, we finished today, today's gone. We lived yesterday, yesterday's gone. We can look to the future, but we only can access moments in the present. We can look forward to the future, but we can't get back to the past. But for God, every moment of the history of the universe, from its inception to its end someday, and every moment in between and every location in the universe, all of them are equally accessible to God. Anything that happened ever stands before God. God can go there. And one of the teachings, actually, one of the mystical teachings of Judaism about when Mashiach comes, when the Messiah comes, and the world is filled with knowledge of God, the way the water fills the sea, is that we might be given a little bit of that. We'll be able to go back to moments in the past. I hope we can go back, for example, to when God revealed God's self at Mount Sinai. We'll be able to visit that and experience it. But until then, the past is lost to us. But it's only lost to us. Everything is present before God all the time. So, when you find yourself wasting time, wasting precious minutes and hours on social media where you could be accomplishing something of value to yourself, your family, your community, the world, good to, might be like that moment that I had when I could have accomplished something, that moment is going to stand forever before God. And when it comes time to be judged, when I leave this world, he's going to say, yeah, remember that moment? You were sitting there just scrolling with your thumbs, wasting time, just killing time. Think of what you could have done with that moment and so many other moments. It could definitely inspire us to make better use of our time. Julie says, the study of Torah, a gate that leads to the fear of heaven. Thank you, Father, for transforming my heart to follow your precepts. Amen. Beautiful, beautiful. And Rose says, coming to his classes makes me feel better. I got diagnosed with chronic lymphocytic leukemia 2 months ago. Oh, Rose, may you experience a complete healing, a refuah shlema, may be complete, an utter healing, and it may be speedy, and may we only hear good news. May you be healed. And we say, Amen. I never lit the candle. Thank you. It's hard to remember to do everything. Each day before I go live, right? So I have to study the whole page and pick what parts I'm going to cover. That's the obvious preparation. And I have to think of a name for the class. That takes a little time. And I have to pick a piece of music to play. And I have to make sure that everything is working. The computer, the phone, the other phone that controls the camera, which is over here. The sound speaker, which plays the music. This microphone, the backup microphone. I take notes, to try to keep track of everything we're doing. And I also try to have a short teaching at the beginning of class, especially on days when it gets technical during the class. I'm 56 years old. My mind is not what it used to be. I can't remember everything, but thank God we have a community learning together, and you reminded me to light the candle. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay. That's it. That's what we've got today. Let me just quickly check over on the YouTube side. No comments over there. Okay. It's great learning with you, my holy sisters and brothers. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, page 73, the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. And just as I mentioned earlier today, we're only about 2 weeks and a little bit away from the end of Tractate Yoma, and then we'll proceed with God's help to Tractate Sukkah, the laws of Sukkot. But that last week, from like June 30th to July 8th, we're going on a family holiday to just spend time with the kids and no work at all. We'll do what we've done before in that situation. You keep reading. I'll keep reading. When I get back, I'll do a highlights show of that week that I missed. And the only wrinkle is when I get back, it's the siyum, right? It'll actually be I'll actually miss it by one day, but the next day when I can do a class again, we'll make a siyum on Tractate Yoma. I just want to give you a heads up about that. Also, this Sunday and we'll be announcing it on the page on Facebook and in our email, is the day of crying out. We're just going to ask as many people as possible. The world has a lot of problems right now, maybe more than usual. And just as, the children of Israel cried out in Egypt and God heard our cry, and the children of Israel cried out in Persia in the story of Esther, in the book of Esther, and God heard our cries. Let's cry out. Let's cry out to our Father in heaven and say, help us. And so all you have to do on this coming Sunday to join the day of crying out is at some point during that day, say 3 words. Help us, God. And then you'll be crying out to our Father in heaven. And if we can get enough people doing that, who knows? Maybe we can shake the foundations of the earth for good, for something good to happen. That's what I've got for us today. Take care. All the best.